Mary sat awkwardly with her stranger-turned-fiancé, Mr. Wickham. She was in his rented home in Meryton, her father and Kitty accompanying them to chaperone. Mary sighed to herself. A bit too late for that. Mary was engaged to Mr. Wickham because of an inadvertent compromise. Several days earlier there was a dreadful hailstorm. Mary, foolish as she was, had found herself in Meryton when the storm had come on suddenly. Her aunt and uncle were not at home, and seeing the light on in the office, she thought her uncle may have been working late in the evening, as he sometimes did. Instead of her uncle, Mr. Wickham, her uncle's new business partner, was working on a large contract well after business hours. As the storm had come on, he had reconciled himself to remain at the office until it abated, for the high winds and hail would make it quite dangerous to go home. Then Mary had arrived, soaked to the skin, hair undone from the wind, and alone. Unable to go back out into the storm and alone together, they strove to make the best of the situation. Mr. Wickham made up the fire and gave his jacket to Mary as she sat near the fire to warm herself. They had hoped that the storm might lessen to the extent that Mr. Wickham might leave her in peace, but it was not to be. The wind whipped about, whistling in its severity. Wickham had attempted to stay awake as long as possible. He hoped to leave as soon as the storm stopped, so as to not compromise her. This was also not to be. He had worked too many late nights in a row, and fell asleep in a chair. While they were yet asleep, Mary on a bed of chair cushions and Wickham in a chair, Mrs. Phillips entered with Mrs. Long to retrieve her reticule that had been left behind the day before when she visited Mr. Phillips at his workplace. There was absolutely no hope that Mary could remain uncompromised, so Mr. Wickham did his duty and offered for her. She supposed she should be grateful, but she could not overcome the unfairness of it all. For her, Mary, to be the Bennet found in a compromising position with a gentleman. She had always lived with the utmost propriety, and yet, due to an accident, she was now betrothed to someone that she barely knew.